Today we visit a century-old historic golf course and talk to a specialist about what we need to know to get the most out of our turf. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart from Florida.
From live animal traps to electronic and organic repellents, Have-A-Heart has been providing homes and businesses with critter control solutions since 1940. Have-A-Heart, caring control for pets and wildlife. Have-A-Heart is proud to support public television and GardenSMART.
I should be arrested for crimes against potted plant kind. My house is where plants came to die.
Miracle Grow potting mix is designed to help grow big, beautiful plants. Everyone grows with Miracle Grow.
Hey there, little Red Riding Hood. You sure are looking good.
I've been to Florida on many occasions, but never to Bocca Grande. I'm lucky enough today to have Lou Hastings, who's the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce here in Bocca Grande, to basically walk me through the island. What do I need to know about Bocca Grande, Florida, Lou?
Well, the first thing you should know is that we're located halfway between Sarasota and Fort Myers on a tiny barrier island right in the Gulf of Mexico. We're about 7.5 miles long and 3/4 of a mile wide at its widest point.
Give me a little bit of the history of the island. How was it founded?
It was actually founded as a port for phosphate over 100 years ago.
I understand also that there's a lot of famous people that come through the island as visitors, and then also some of the founding fathers, if you will, of the island.
There are and have been people like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Zane Grey, Ernest Hemingway, all came here in search of the Silver King and to fish out in the beautiful waters of Bocca Grande Pass and Charlotte Harbor.
Well, you mentioned the waters as we were coming over the bridge onto the island. It looks like Caribbean water. There's blues and greens and beautiful white sandy beaches, and as I've heard also, the fishing is fantastic here.
Absolutely. We have a tournament that takes place here every year. It's called the World's Richest Tarpon Tournament, and basically our three tenets are conservation, education, and sportsmanship. We want to teach people that they can go out and fish for these big sport fish, but we can also do it responsibly to create a sustainable fishery.
That's great. This is a beautiful island, Lou. I can't wait to tour it.
I can't wait for you to see everything that we have here to offer, and please make sure you go out and enjoy everything.
We will. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Eric.
Appreciate it. We're here today with Jeff Struthers, who's the golf course superintendent at the Gasparilla Inn. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Jeff, I remember as a horticulturalist, this is the job that everyone who had an interest in turfgrass management wanted, being the superintendent of one of these beautiful resort golf courses. What got you here?
Well, I started at an early age. My father was a farmer, so at an early age I was driving tractors and harvesting crops, and kind of got away from it a little bit, went off to college and couldn't really find anything that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I loved the game of golf. There was Sand Hills College was near my hometown, so I knew they had a very reputable program, so I decided to go there. I started off kind of in the landscape gardening side, and towards the end I switched to turf maintenance. I did my internship and worked in Pinehurst for a couple years. Then I headed off to Kiowa Island in Charleston, South Carolina, and we planted a variety of seashore paspalum, which is a newer grass. It's the most salt-tolerant turf grass that's in use today, and that's kind of how we came here.
This is a very well-established, storied golf course. It's almost a century old now. What can you tell us about its history?
It actually is right at a century old. Next season will be our centennial. The inn was started in 1913. The golf course was built in the early 30s by Baron Collier. The architect's really unknown. There was some minor changes along the way, but nothing major. In 2004, architect Pete Dye came in and totally renovated the golf course. The golf course was flat. There were no undulations, no drainage. He came in and they planted a seashore paspalum, which is, like I said, is a salt-tolerant variety of turf grass, which kind of is perfect for this location, you know, due to the salt.
Sure.
We water with affluent water. Sometimes we get into brackish water, so it's really good out here. But 2004 is when I came, when the golf course was totally redone.
Well, you've got the place in great shape. I can't wait to see it. Jeff, as you know well, the average golf course is going to be anywhere from maybe 70 to well over 100 acres. So the type of turf that you select is super important. You're committing all that space to, in some cases, only 2 or 3 different kinds of grass. And I know you guys have gone with this, a type that I've never heard of before.
Seashore paspalum that we talked about earlier. And in our case, we selected it just for its salt tolerance. You know, we're here on an island. We're on Bocca Grande, but the golf course is on its own island, actually. So it's a very high saline environment. The grass was actually developed in the University of Georgia, but the story kind of goes back to the slave ships actually brought it over as bedding in their ships, and when they got to the ports, they would throw it overboard, and it kind of, you know, in places it took roots. And obviously it survived on the coast, so it's very good in a salt environment.
Yeah, it's very important. You guys are right here on the water. And notice as we were walking up to this green, it's a little bit coarser textured grass. It reminds me of Poa annua a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely different than, say, Bermuda grass, which is probably the typical warm season grass used on a golf course. It does play a little bit different, but it's great for our situation.
Well, I think we need to go get our clubs and test it out.
Okay.
Turfgrass, not unlike any other plant that we would look at, has certain regions where it likes to grow best. So you have certain grasses that are basically designed more for warm season, other grasses are designed more for cooler climates.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the kind of grasses that our homeowners should be looking for, depending upon where they live.
Well, in a southern environment, your main grasses that are going to be used on a home lawn will be zoysia grass, which is what we're standing on here, St. Augustine, and Bermuda grass, centipede as well. They've all got, you know, their requirements. They've all got their own set of problems. And one of the main factors you should be looking at is how much shade you have on your lawn. St. Augustine handles the shade very well, probably the best out of the ones I've named. Then zoysia, and Bermuda's not very well in the shade. So depending on the microclimate in your yard, you definitely want to select the right grass.
There's a big textural difference between some of these grasses. So with centipede, St. Augustine, those tend to be more coarse textured, more springy grasses, whereas, you know, with Bermuda and zoysia, those tend to be more the athletic feel kind of grasses. Right. So like you said, you know, the activities that are going to be going on also, you know, come into play when we're looking at what we ought to plant.
Exactly. Bermuda grass is the #1 grass for athletic fields in the South. Zoysia grass, you know, if you're going to be doing activities in your lawn, you probably want to steer away from St. Augustine grass. But you may get in a situation where you have a shady back lawn and you have full sun in your front yard, so you may could go with a Bermuda centipede in your front lawn and a St. Augustine in your back.
In most parts of Florida, you have a nice sandy loam soil, and but in parts of the southeast, it's more of a compacted red clay. What kind of grasses would you recommend for the soils that are more compacted?
Well, you're still going to be limited to the same types of grasses, but a Bermuda would work well, a zoysia would work well. Then you're going to get into different fertility rates. A clay is going to hold nutrients more, so you may get away with a little less fertilization than you would in a sandy soil, which is going to leach, has more potential for leaching.
That's great advice. Okay, we've discussed some of the criteria for selecting the right grass for warmer areas, but what should we do if we live in a cooler part of the country?
Well, if you're up in the cooler part, you're obviously going to want a cool season turf, which is going to be your fescues, your Kentucky bluegrass, some ryegrasses. One of a great resource to use, once you've selected what type of turf grass you want, you can go on the National Turfgrass Evaluation Program's website, and they have now to where you can just select your state. It shows the different seed varieties. It evaluates them. You can look at different years where different years have different scores, and you can really hone in on a good variety that would do good in your area.
You know, you talk about some of these cool season grasses. I know many of those are available by seed, and then of course we have other grasses that can only be sodded or plugged.
All of your warm season grasses typically are going to be sprigged or plugged or sodded. When you get into your cool season grasses, seeds are available for most of those, which makes it a lot more economical, a lot more practical. Hydroseeding is a good option, but you are more limited in the warm season grasses to the way you can plant them.
In many parts of the country, we see the use of the warm season and the cool season grasses together, and as you mentioned, you know, we can use seeds oftentimes on top of these grasses that have been plugged or sodded during the transitional times of the year.
Right, that would be overseeding. You know, if you're in a transitional area somewhere around North South Carolina into Georgia, you can overseed if you want a warm season grass, but obviously it's going to turn dormant in the wintertime. If you want some color throughout the winter, you can overseed with perennial ryegrass, which is what we're on this field here. It's perennial ryegrass on top of the seashore paspalum. We didn't necessarily need to. The paspalum stays green as you saw on the golf course, but this area is a soccer field, dog park, so it gets a little more traffic, so we put it out, you know, just to handle a little bit more wear and tear.
For more information on selecting the turf grass that's right for you, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. One of the issues that we end up having to deal with, whether it's a residential lawn or an athletic field, or especially on a golf course where you have carts driving over the grass, is compaction. You guys have just done your aeration here. What are you looking for, Jeff?
Well, a number of things really. You're going to get better water infiltration. You're going to get oxygen down to your roots and better gas exchange. Grass is just like any other plant. It needs air, light, and water. So you really open it up for gas exchange, air movement, water penetration, and you know, you saw the machine we use is more of a golf course machine, but a homeowner can rent at your local hardware store. You can rent a air fryer. I would suggest doing it one time a year. I don't think you need to really go any more than that. And if you can't aerify, you can use a dethatcher, which is, you know, I would definitely suggest doing that at least once a year. In the fall, it's going to remove your thatch. It's going to allow for better water penetration as well. If you get a thatch buildup, your water's going to go into that thatch, and it's kind of going to act like a sponge and hold water there. You're going to have more disease. So it's just, you know, the right thing to do, especially if you're overseeding or going to interseed your yard with a cool season grass, just to get you a little bit denser stand over the winter time.
Yeah, so a combination of aeration and dethatching, it allows the roots to breathe and the tops to breathe. And even if you don't think you have a compaction issue, bear in mind that a lot of the residential compaction is caused by irrigation and by rain.
Yeah.
Does a lot to compact the soil. So it's a good every year practice. And you know, right here you're pulling, you know, maybe 2-inch plugs that are about as big as your pinky. And so now we're going to get a lot of new root growth, and then I guess after you get done with this, you're just going to basically rake the plugs back into the hole, so you have nice loose dirt that backfills all the little holes we just made.
Exactly, and for a homeowner, I would just suggest, you know, maybe even if you've got a rotary mower, you can just go over it and chop them back up, then maybe go over it again with your bagger and pick up all the actual grass and organic stuff. But it's a very good tool that will definitely help you with a much nicer lawn.
And if you top seed, it's a good time to go ahead and put down your top seed when you're aerating.
Yep.
brush the sand back on top of the seeds?
Especially dethatching, because seed to soil contact is very, very critical. So if you can remove some of that thatch and put your seed down, you're really going to get good seed soil contact, and you're going to have a much better finished product.
Absolutely. One of the topics that we get a lot of interest from our viewers on is how do I control weeds, disease, and insects in turf? Do you have some practical advice for us there, Jeff?
Well, the most practical advice would be to provide as healthy of a turf as you can. You know, a healthy, dense turf is going to be your #1 preventative for weeds. Your cultural practices, keep good drainage, good airflow. That's going to prevent a lot of your diseases. No grass is perfect, so you know you may have stuff pop up here and there, but you know being proactive is much more of a better way to attack things than letting them happen and reacting to them.
Absolutely. Well, healthy plants typically do not attract disease and insects. If you look at a landscape, generally the plant that has the insects all over it is one that was weakened by some other kind of environmental stress. And as you said, with regards to weeds, you look at how tight this turf is, it's going to be really hard for seeds to find a good place to germinate. So definitely having a nice, vibrant, healthy growing environment is great for preventing weeds, disease, and insects.
Exactly. You know, you do have pre-emergent herbicides you can use for weeds, but going back to a little bit about diseases, you know, you may get one here and there. You know, you do all the right things, you still may have one pop up. The one thing I would suggest with that is get it identified as soon as you can from one of your university laboratories. You know, you may spend a little bit of money up front, but it could save you a lot more in the end.
Absolutely. You know, I know one thing that we encounter oftentimes with turf is we'll see the presence of an insect that's doing some kind of damage to the root system, and it's hard to tell from, you know, from the top side what's burrowing under our grass. And I know you guys have got a great diagnostic tool that you use to figure out what's actually doing the damage.
Sure. Come on and I'll show you.
Awesome.
As you can see, we've got a little bit of what appears to be insect damage here, and we're going to show you a cool little trick you can do in your own lawn to diagnose what type of pest you have. And all you do is take a couple tablespoons of dish detergent. For some reason, lemon scent seems to work a little bit better, and mix it in a bucket of water and just pour it on the area that looks like it may have whatever it is going on. And whatever it is should come to the surface, and you can make a definitive identification of it.
That's a great tip. So we've got your assistant Steve here who's going to go and put the water down, Steve. And how long does it typically take before we start seeing the insects emerging?
It could take anywhere from a minute to 4 to 5 minutes.
What are the kind of insects that you guys typically end up having problems with?
Our main pests are mole crickets, army worms, sod web worms, nematodes, which nematode is probably the worst in the south on golf courses. They're microscopic and can really do damage.
Oh, there's one.
And here comes a mole cricket now.
Right there.
And he's a little bit smaller one, so that tells us that he's one that hatched in the ground.
One very important step that oftentimes gets missed as we're looking at our landscape is getting a real understanding as to what's going on in the soil. And this is especially important when we're opening up a new site that we're about to develop, getting an understanding of what the fertility is, what the pH is, but then also just as a matter of normal maintenance course, understanding how much salt buildup do we have going on in our soil. Has our pH shifted on the basis of some kind of fertilizer that we're using? And I'd like for you to tell us what you guys do from a standpoint of doing soil testing.
Well, first of all, you want to perform the soil test. And we have a soil probe that we're going to use, and we're going to go select maybe 8 or 10 areas in our lawn. You don't want to take it all from the same spot because you may have, you know, subtle differences around your lawn. And you want to take plugs from the, you know, between 2 and 4 inches. You don't want to include the grass part on the top. You don't want to include down below because you want to get what's in your root zone where you're going to be, where the roots are actively taking up nutrients. So you go around and do your soil test. You want to send it off to a laboratory. You can send it off to your university labs. There's, turf labs that you can use. Like you mentioned, the pH. pH is very important. Some of your nutrients will be blocked. They won't be available at certain pHs. So that's one of the critical things. You may need to apply lime. So how do you know how much of what you're going to apply? So that's really where the soil test is going to help us.
Right, and one thing to bear in mind too, if we don't have one of these fancy soil probes, we can also use a hand trowel or maybe a small shovel. Just pull up the same swath from parts that are, taking representative samples throughout a yard. One question for you also, Jeff. If I don't have a chemistry degree, how do I interpret the results I get back from the soil test?
Well, you really don't, none of us have chemistry degrees. The lab that you send your sample off to, usually the sample will include some recommendations at the bottom. They'd be glad for you to call them and, kind of go over some things with you. Your county extension agent will be happy to go over some things with you. There's lots of websites, turf forums that I've been on, and guys are happy to look at stuff for you. So don't be discouraged that you can't interpret it yourself. There's people out there to help you.
Last but not least, there's one very important piece of the puzzle that we need to get before we have a really solid lawn maintenance program, and that of course is fertility. What should we do? That
is very important. So we just did our soil test. We got our recommendation. First of all, let's look at a fertilizer bag. Okay, I'm sure everyone's seen a fertilizer bag and sees these numbers on it. So what exactly do they mean? Okay, these numbers are in percentages. So we have 13% nitrogen, 2% phosphorus, 13% potassium. And these are always going to represent that. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium on every fertilizer bag. They're all the same. Okay, so in our case, let's say we got recommended that we need a pound of potassium per 1,000. So with a little math, we know that if we want 1 pound of potassium with 13% product, we want to put out 7.6 pounds of fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. So a lot of times we're going to calibrate our spreader for half of that and go in two directions so we alleviate some skips and overlaps. But for the consumer, they make it a little bit easier. It's got the dial on here that shows you where the setting is, so you match them up, and it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. We like to be a little more exact, but this is fine for the consumer to feed their yard.
Great. So once we figure out how much we need to put out, we need to then know how often do we put it out, and is there a better time of year to put it out?
Well, generally you're going to want to put it out during the growing season. That's when the roots are actively taking up nutrients, so you're going to have less potential for runoff. For the consumer, most of their programs are set out for you. You've got a spring, late spring, summer, fall. But a good rule of thumb is during the growing season.
Let me ask you this, Jeff. Oftentimes fertilizer gets a bad rap for environmental reasons and runoff that ends up in streams. What's your opinion there?
Well, there definitely is potential for that. You always want to leave an 8 to 10 foot buffer if you're fertilizing adjacent to a water body. And you want to water your fertilizer in for a 1/4 inch with your irrigation system. I know we've all heard you want to put out fertilizer before it rains, but you really don't, because if it rains too hard, that's when you're really going to have potential for some runoff.
Well, those are some great tips. I feel like you've armed us with the information we need to have a beautiful lawn all year long. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us, and I really appreciate you showing us your amazing backyard.
Thanks for coming. We enjoyed it.
Another show, another amazing garden. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we've enjoyed producing it. If you watch the show, you know we travel the country visiting beautiful gardens. Well, we have a surprise in store for several in the audience. To learn more about the surprise, visit our website at GardenSMART.com.
From live animal traps to electronic and organic repellents, Have a Heart has been providing homes and businesses with critter control solutions since 1940. Have a Heart, caring control for pets and wildlife. Have a Heart is proud to support public television and GardenSMART.
I should be arrested for crimes against potted plant kind. My house is where plants came to die.
Miracle-Gro potting mix is designed to help grow big, beautiful plants. Everyone grows with Miracle-Gro.
Hey there, little red blackbird. You sure are looking good.
Today we picked up some great tips on how to be successful with turf, even in challenging environments, as well as learning the cultural requirements that we need to get the most out of our lawn in the years to come. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great tips and ideas as we garden smart.